My husband was hit by a car while on his Ebike 2 weeks ago. No fractures of any sort miraculously, but has a mid-temporal trauma subarachnoid hemorrhage on his right side. He is supremely lucky to be alive, and his 2-day stint in the ICU was filled with onlookers of the man who was crushed in a car but only suffered a minor laceration and brain bleed. This man is very anti-hospital and finicky and insists he's fine, but his mother and I disagree because he has permanent optical nerve damage due to an extremely rare brain aneurysm. It wasn't an aneurysm, I just don't know what to call it because it doesn't have a name yet, he had as a child. The doctors said that puts him at even higher risk than if he were normal. I think he should go back to the ER to get another scan and suck it the frick up, and these symptoms are why. He is still having high blood pressure spikes, his average has been 160/100ths, highest spike while sitting was 210/150, heart rate averaged around 60 but he had sinus bradycardia when he was released with a max dip of 39 times 3 hours before he left, possibly due to a med they gave him currently not on the list for some reason. Ever since stopping the weak prescription of Keppra his headache has now turned into an additional severe toothache that makes his brain feel wiggly. The headache that originally was in the middle right of his brain where the bleed is, has been traveling around, specifically the back section of his brain. He has been sleeping abnormally long, usually it's 4 hours a day, but he's been sleeping 10 to 14 hours a day some days. His sense of taste has been funky, and some foods are disgusting to him now even though he loved them. Concerning the toothache, it keeps switching from his tooth to his brain, and it's so bad he's been breaking the rules and taking 1,200 milligrams of Tylenol every 6 hours rather than the capped amount of 650 milligrams, and he says it doesn't help at all. He's also been hammering Orajel into his teeth, literally saying it's not helping but it helps. Cognitively he's okay, a bit slower than normal but that's kind of to be expected with a head injury. No tingles or numbness, passes all sensory tests and reflex tests. His wrist is starting to hurt, he crushed the back of the car with it so I suspect it's got a buckle fracture at least, I had one as a kid /. The main worrying thing is the back of head headache that won't go away, and the fact that he's still getting very dizzy in weird situations. Against my judgment, he hopped onto my bike last week to make sure he can still mentally deal with biking, and he surprisingly has been very good on it, and only has an issue once he stops. He gets super dizzy when staying still and is perfectly fine when moving. When he took a shower last night, he wasn't dizzy at all but became very dizzy as soon as the water was shut off and he stopped moving. The ICU said the dizziness should have gone away after roughly a week but this is week 2 and it's not getting any better. Am I wrong for wanting to force him to go back and at least get looked at? In our area, the nearest time to see a basic PCP is a 3-month wait, and my neurologist, only outpatient one in our area, has a 6-month waiting list for new patients. Also if we do go, how can he convince them to not give him any IVs? His veins and arms are sensitive and still bruised from his original stay, and he doesn't want them prodding at him just to do a basic CT scan and wrist x-ray. Many thanks in advance, sorry for the length, I can provide other info if needed and if y'all want to see the damage to the lady's car I'm down to put it in the comments but only if there's an actual want for it. Also, this isn't an emergency post, I understand neurological emergency signs, I have neurological issues myself, I just need someone to back my concerns because me and his mother aren't convincing enough apparently. Edit, just realized I left out personality changes. Usually, he is a generally angry person, but has been unexplainably sad since the accident, crying at the sight of the simplest of things like a crushed water bottle our kittens were playing with. Also, his newest symptom is popping and crackling in his right ear. Update 1. Yesterday my husband and I waited all day for my mill to call when she was going to come over to say hi. I had to text her at 1 p.m. because I was starting to get pissed off she hasn't said anything yet, and her response led to me punching a wall without thinking. She said that I was assuming she and her partner, were out to lunch with Bill, Sil, and their daughter who they got to have a surprise visitation day. She said after lunch when my niece went home at 3 p.m., she would come see us. I was furious, but whatever. My husband was distraught but again playing it off. Well eventually around 5:30 p.m. we got a call from my mill saying she was coming over. Well finally. We made a plan for her to come pick us up so we could get pizza for dinner, we can't drive, and I laid out a whole idea my husband came up with to get some pizza, go see a movie, and maybe go play some pool afterward because that's a pastime his mother loves. Well nope, Mill said she needs to return to Bill's house, so she'll be picking us up to get pizza, and then we're gonna go see Bill and Sil afterward. Oh. Of course. So we went with that plan for the sake of not starting an argument. When she showed up, she was nice enough to come up to our apartment and say hi to my dad who lives with us, but wanted to leave right away. The only reason we didn't was because my mill brought her sister, K60F, who hasn't lived in the area or even visited for 30 years, but came with Mill to see my husband specifically. She sat with my dad asking a bunch of questions, looking through all the hospital paperwork and accident reports, etc. Honestly stuff his mother should have been doing, but wasn't, and was instead just chatting with my dad and trying to scoot everyone out the door. After a while, we left and got pizza, and Mill took us to Bill's place. We spent 2 hours sitting there talking about Bill and how awful his life is. He quit his job because it sucks, his car is broken again, he wants this and that but can't get it because everyone keeps fighting him, yada yada. Meanwhile, my husband was getting sicker and sicker looking, and Kay and I were constantly bugging him to sit or drink something, or even get ready to go to the hospital because he didn't look good at all and he was starting to get confused by stuff. Huge red flag. Now here's where everything spiraled. Kay suggested that maybe we take my husband home at least because he was starting to sway in his seat and she was guessing maybe he was just tired. My Sil though, started freaking out saying we need to call an ambulance. See, my Sil had a severe traumatic brain bleed happen years ago due to circumstances. And she is also a super empath. According to her, she could sense something was super wrong and that my husband needed to be seen right away without delay. Now my husband usually would be refusing viciously at this point. He hates hospitals and especially hates ambulances. But he wasn't saying anything, so I knew something was wrong and started making the call. My Mill and Bill seemed maybe a little worried, but they kept playing it off saying, he's probably just tired. He probably needs to rest. It wasn't until my husband threw up all over the floor that they got the fucking picture. I sat and handled the phone call while Kay and my Sil tended to my husband. Now I don't know what happened because my back was turned when I was on the phone, but the next second, I heard a wicked loud yelp and then the sound of crashing glass. Then lots of yelling. According to Kay, what happened was my Sil went to hold my husband's head as he was starting to go limp, so they were transferring him to a laying position, and my Sil ended up taking his head and laying it on her lap because their floor is hardwood and she was afraid he'd hit his head. Totally valid worry and I thank her for it. My stupid Bill didn't like that though, and without thinking about anyone but himself, grabbed my Sil by the hair, picked her up by it, she's tiny so it's very easy, and threw her into their coffee table. Multiple things happen at once and I can still see it in my mind's eye in slow-mo. First, my husband's head had dropped to the ground, and Kay wasn't close enough to catch him, so he ended up hitting his head. At this point I turned around, and saw Sil in a bloody pile of glass, Mill holding Bill back from trying to attack Sil, while my husband was having a full grand mal seizure on the floor beside them about to get stepped on. Panic doesn't even begin to describe the feeling I had. Even though unfortunately, due to my having epilepsy, I understand and know seizure protocol. I was in a panic noting the time and all that jazz, I didn't even notice the EMTs and police show up. They heard the crash on the phone and assumed to send police as well. The ambulance scooped my husband when his seizure luckily stopped, rushed him to our chosen hospital, and scooped my Sil off with my Mill to go to a separate hospital closer by. The one my husband was brought to is a level 4 trauma center and is better equipped. Kay drove behind us in the ambulance because apparently she's acting mother now, which at this point I don't even care about anymore. So now my shitty Bill is in the police station and has finally been arrested for his actions. Not sure if my Sil will continue with that as this is not their first rodeo, nor do I know what will happen with my niece now. My Mill is staying with my Sil so she's not alone, but she should really be swapped with Kay, and even Kay thinks so too. I asked Kay what's been going on with Mill, and why lie and pull such a ruse, and she said she has no idea what's going on, but something does seem strange as this is totally outside of Mill's normal behavior. We don't suspect she's using drugs as she has pretty severe heart problems, but something's definitely up. But that doesn't matter at all to me right now. I did end up saying something to my Mill over the phone last night. I as calmly as possible just let her know how my husband has been taking her sudden neglect and told her hopefully this is a wake-up call to stop putting all her time, care, and attention to a wife-beating piece of crap. She's actually his longtime girlfriend, but case still stands. Her response was stuttering and then silence. She's supposed to be here in half an hour but now I don't even know if that's gonna be a thing because supposedly Bill is going to be released sometime this morning on bail so I assume she'll run off to be with him instead. Sil said no matter what, she'll walk here if she has to. Concerning my husband, he was brought straight past the ER, directly to the ICU, after being shoved through a CT scan. They said he had had a rebleed and it had grown 2 centimeters more than it was before, putting a lot more pressure on his brain, hence the seizure. I knew it was a risk but it's awful to watch your universe convulse uncontrollably. I know my husband watches it happen to me constantly, but it's very surreal being on the other end of the situation. We're currently waiting for any news other than bad news because so far it's been nothing but bad news, and if the bleed doesn't stop they have to fly him to the big city nearby to one of the bigger hospitals to be prepped for surgery. I am freaking the fuck out but no there's nothing I can really do at this point but be here for him and divulge every bit of info anyone might ever need about him. I don't want my husband to die. If he dies I literally won't be able to continue living in this world. So hopefully he lives, and his mother comes to fucking see him. Forgot to mention, Mill originally was only staying in town for 2 days. That second day she was in town was to be our only day with her. The next day she was planning to take Bill and his family to the beach, and then travel up north again for the rest of her stay to be with her other sister. So that this trip is to see you line was as horse shit as I thought it was. Now I don't know what her plans are. Update 2. Hello everyone. I wasn't expecting such a turnout of well-wishers and concerned readers, and I appreciate everyone's comments of concern, advice, and overall support. It has made the time go by, rather than be at a standstill. Now for the update, which will hopefully answer some concerns and questions y'all had. Shortly after my last update, my husband went in for another CT scan and things were looking good. No growth of the bleed whatsoever, so he was on a 6-hour watch until his next CT to see if he could be labeled stable again. He made it 2 hours before having another grand mal seizure, luckily only lasting 2 minutes total. They weren't sure whether to give another CT right away due to a possible cluster, so after an hour or so he went off for another CT. They also prepped the helicopter in case it was needed to fly him to the bigger city an hour away so that he could get surgery there, as the hospital we were at wasn't equipped for that. Turns out that the seizure opened the hole and now the bleed was fucking massive. It had reached 5.3 centimeters and was leaking towards his ventricles. My husband was somehow conscious and his eyes were open, but he definitely was not all there, and could barely speak. He did recognize me though, and he was able to remember and say our special goodbye that we say to each other before they took him off to the helicopter. I wanted to go with him, but they told me it would be better if I could drive because my weight would slow them down and they needed the space. I called bullshit but didn't want to fight them too much, and left with K as I am not able to drive. On the way to the city, I called my mill to see what was going on with Sil and informed them of the situation, as I had directly been ignoring their texts for the most part because I'd been staring at my husband for hours on end. Mill freaked out and said she was already on the road and that she would be on the way to the city as well. She also informed me Sil was with her and would be coming with, who then took the phone to inform me Bill was staying in jail for DV and drug possession, as he had his daily dose of shenanigans in his pocket at the time of his arrest. Sil also let me know that she was fine and that she just needed some stitches around her eyebrow because some glass cut her face. By the time I got to the hospital in the city, my husband was already in surgery. The plan I guess was to stop the bleeding from the source itself, and try to remove some of the built-up blood because it was creating too much pressure on his brain. He had another seizure on the helicopter ride, and the bleed was even bigger, although they either never told me the size, or I didn't even soak that in at that point. But at this point, the only thing that I could do was wait out the surgery and see what would happen next. I'm no stranger to waiting for close family to hopefully survive awful and life-threatening situations and surgeries. It's like a curse that followed me since I was 4. Death follows me like the plague, and other than my husband, I only have my dad left as living family. I prayed death would take the fucking day off. My mill got to the hospital about half an hour after Kay and I. She was in hysterics, apologizing to me and Kay, and begging the doctors to let her into the surgery room at first but then acquiescing when told it was too late to see him. I told her she needs to tone it down and she's lucky I've even let her know where he is or what's even going on considering how she's been acting, and I honestly spent a good hour sitting there tearing into this woman. I loved my mill and felt so hurt that she left my husband high and dry to cater to a monster. I hated her for using our softer sides against us to drag us to my Bill's house and into a living fucking nightmare. She listened tearfully and ate every word I dished to her. I didn't feel better afterward whatsoever. She was an absolute wreck and I could see it. Years of worry for my husband, dread and regret, sadness, and understanding. She looked very broken and it made me feel so much worse. She's helped us so much for years. She housed us for free while we struggled for work. Fed us with no questions. Gave us rides and support in all times of need. Hell, this woman taught me to crochet, which is my favorite thing to do in this world besides my husband. Insert quirky laughter here, I'm currently too tired. So when she responded to me with what she did, I honestly wasn't surprised and a little pissed at myself for not seeing it in the first place, and yelling at her as hard as I did. My mill and my Sil have been working for the past year to get my niece adopted by my mill behind Bill's back, along with all of our backs as well because they wanted as few people to know as possible for the safety of my Sil. When my Sil overdosed a year ago, and they lost custody of my niece, I guess when she was taken away there were lots of stipulations to get her back, and while my Sil has gone through recovery and everything beautifully, my Bill was uncompliant and making the process complicated for no reason. He also was completely unresponsive and still is unresponsive to all correspondences and calls from CPS, so did not know of any of the proceedings even though they sent him forms to sign. My mill had flown them out to give them a vacation to hopefully restart their mentality so she could get them started on a new path to life and hopefully get my Bill to become compliant, and I guess she made this decision when my Bill responded by stealing her car to row him around the city to find drugs and came back belligerent and abusive. So all the secrecy of this specific trip was because things were being finalized this week. The paperwork was signed the day of what I will call the incident, and my mill wanted all of us to get together that night so she could break the news to my Bill and so we could hopefully celebrate. She feels horrible for what happened, and even somehow feels bad that my Bill still doesn't know yet because he has the right to since he's her father. I want to be there when he's told and his brain implodes honestly. I'd die of laughter in the parking lot. I asked her why she bothered and why not report Bill sooner since she knew what was going on, and she responded that she didn't want to mess up the adoption. I told her that was extremely irresponsible and that Sil was at such a high risk, but Sil assured me that she wouldn't have had it any other way and that things worked out perfectly. Well, other than my husband. She didn't mean that maliciously, she meant it factually. Nobody planned for my husband to decline so badly all of a sudden, which led to my Sil to go into helper mode which made my Bill jealous. According to Sil he suspects she's cheating with my husband, which led to all of the events that unfolded until now so far. After all their explanations I honestly was just numb. Didn't know what to feel or think. I still kind of don't. I'm horrendously angry at both of them, and they both admitted that it doesn't excuse their fault in this, nor is my Mill absolved from her crimes of abandoning her son in his time of need, and they've been saints since to repent, but I don't even know if I can be mad at them anymore. I know that they needed to dance around my bill, so that's understandable. I just wish they let us know. They didn't, because we are usually naturally LC, so they didn't see the point in saying anything. Bad excuse, and now my husband gets to suffer for their incompetence. I told my Mill and Sil, they're lucky I don't press charges against them, and they agreed that's fair and that they deserve whatever crap comes their way. 8 hours after going in, my husband came out of surgery alive, thank fuck. They supposedly closed the source of the bleed, but there was a lot more blood than was originally realized, and it created a lot of pressure, and I honestly don't care to type out all the medical bullshit they told me, but pretty much due to the scar tissue and permanent damage that was already present on my husband's optical nerves from his childhood clot/aneurysm. The pressure from the bleed created a massive strain on said optical nerves, and with the way things are, my husband is blind and will be for the time being until the inflammation from surgery and bleeding is absorbed. Hopefully. My husband opened his eyes yesterday afternoon, unable to see entirely. He previously had 1.5 eyes worth of sight, and now he has none. He only remembers getting pizza and saying goodbye to me. Everything else in between was empty space. He's having a lot of neurological issues so far, obviously, and his speech is extremely slurred, but he is alive, cognitive, and has motor function. He remembers me and his mother and remembers our special words and hand hold. He is luckily still my husband so far. This is not his first time being blind, and he is surprisingly okay with it for now at least. He says it's kind of nostalgic in a way. I didn't want to worry him, but he kept asking questions, so I told him everything that had been going on from beginning to end. He fell asleep as I was telling him the story, and when he awoke later when the nurse came in to check on him, he asked for the rest. I know he needs to be resting, but my husband is the type of person who needs to know. He is an informational index that needs to constantly be fed, and it kills him to not know things and have answers withheld from him. I am so happy he is alive. Mill is extending her stay and will be staying with me in the city along with Sil, and they're paying for my hotel. Kay will be leaving in 2 days when the vacation is supposed to be over, as she can't miss work. She has a high security job. We're all waiting for news on Bill, and on the hospital that did the original surgery when my husband was a child, to see if anyone from the team might still possibly be in practice and have some insight as to where to go from here. There's a lot of personal things I left out because this case is very rare and has this teaching hospital in a frenzy. My husband's childhood event was a rare situation, so this is something that's never happened before so far from what they told us. Update 3. Howdy everyone who has found this. I'm using this Reddit as a diary at this point. I love reading the comments and venting the events out to someone other than family, as my husband and I don't have friends as we're both pretty introverted. Not much to say so far other than my husband is still in the hospital and is still blind. They've contacted some of the old neurologists from his childhood but haven't gotten anywhere with research yet. The bleed hasn't grown, but the swelling hasn't gone down much either. His blood pressure has been stable at least. My Mill had to go home. She was not happy about it, but she is planning to move back across the country to stay nearby rather than move my niece to her house as was the original plan before all this. She already has called a realtor to look at a house in the area as well, so she's all in on this, I guess. Therefore she needed to go back with her partner. He has been with her the whole time since she returned with Sil from the hospital, to pack up their stuff and get things settled. I've been keeping her updated. She's been gone for 3 days so far and is due back sometime next week or so. My niece will remain at my aunt-in-law's house until she returns. My Sil is staying with me from now on. I haven't been home minus to grab some stuff for my husband, so she's been staying there to help take care of my dad. He's elderly but still mostly independent, and my cats as well. Honestly, she's been an absolute saint. Luckily her job is very flexible, so she has been able to take lots of time off for now while she helps, which I severely appreciate. Plus this all keeps her mind off of what's been going on with Bill. I don't know, I've just been working with my husband and the therapists and doctors every day, while also managing everything legally with the lawyers regarding the accident that started all this mess, and all that jazz. It's been oh so fun. I'm fine though, no need to worry about moi. I've been enjoying this time with my husband the best I can. He's still definitely suffering many neurological complications that keep changing day to day, so it's hard to tell what's going to happen next, so we're just taking everything one day at a time. Oh, and Bill's first trial was rescheduled. He tried to kill himself in holding when Sil contacted him to let him know what was going on with my husband, so they have him in some sort of mental health evaluation hold for now or something. Sil didn't explain it well and I don't feel like researching right now. He doesn't know about my niece yet either. Sil decided to wait until he's seen someone to talk to first, like a therapist. I told her to just get it over with, and she's considering it. I'll post again if anything happens. Happy doom scrolling.